not a pagan holiday. We celebrate it because of emancipation, of when we came out of slavery, the black people came out of slavery. But when you see the chains, it means that we break the chains of slavery. Good. Yeah, that is what we're celebrating right here and right now.
You can't heal a body you hate. Start by saying thank you to your legs for carrying you and to your heart for beating. Gratitude is the soil all other healing grows in.
Divine, all blessed greetings and salutations, honor and respect, honor and respect, honor and respect. It is another edition of Revolutionary Hoodoo, New Orleans Voodoo Secrets and Recipes, powered, produced, promoted, sponsored, and supported by NOIVD, New Orleans International Voodoo Day. 2026 New Orleans International Voodoo Day promises an inspiring and immersive experience with a diverse lineup of engaging events. Highlights include an educational symposium featuring distinguished speakers from around the world, including a delegation of scholars and spiritual leaders from Benin and Haiti, as well as art exhibitions showcasing voodoo-inspired works by talented local and international artists. The event will also include a children's program, an Afroecology exhibit, exploring the sacred nature of plants in voodoo, their role in spiritual practices, and their connections to our ancestors. The weekend will culminate in a ceremonial procession to 9 significant sites throughout the city, locations where the enslaved were brought ashore, held, auctioned, and where they later found community and developed culture. This journey will begin at the transatlantic slave route to New Orleans marker on the moonwalk at the river and will conclude with the traditional voodoo ceremony at Congo Square. Additionally, visitors can participate in interactive workshops, community discussions, and opportunities to connect with practitioners and cultural experts. And certainly, we continue to invite your participation in this 9 p.m. Central Standard Time weeknight daily podcast. We also want to acknowledge those who show up here in our live chat. Greetings, Nina Lloyd. Peace and blessings, Lydia Martin. Divine All Blessed, Britt Brat Dash, and the beloved Mambo Sally Ann. We certainly appreciate you and honor you for joining us. I will unmute Sister Toni Val Martinez and Elder Reggie momentarily. In the continuation of our narrative, tonight we want to talk briefly about African conjurers in day-to-day existence. Aside from their obvious presence in the trial records of slave revolts and conspiracies, conjurers also make their appearance in a number of slave narratives, interviews, biographies, and autobiographies as agents in day-to-day forms of resistance. Through these sources, there is ample proof that conjurers were an ever-present factor in the lives of the majority of North American slaves. No less an authority than William Wells Brown once noted that nearly every large plantation had at least one who claimed to be a fortune teller and who was regarded with more than common respect by his fellow slaves. Speaking on the widespread appeal of conjuration in South Carolina in the early 1800s, Charles Ball added that enslaved Africans are universally subject to the grossest and most abject superstition and uniformly believe in witchcraft, conjuration, and the agency of evil spirits in the affairs of human life. Combined, these statements demonstrate that not only were conjurers ubiquitous, but belief in their supernatural abilities encompassed a large portion of the slave populace. For Frederick Douglass, a conjurer named Sandy Jenkins of Eastern Maryland created a shaping impression on his early life. After a savage beating he received at the hands of Edward Covey, a man who enjoyed the reputation of being a first-rate hand at breaking young slaves, Douglass eventually turned to Sandy Jenkins for aid. In Douglass' words, Sandy was not only a religious man, but he professed to believe in a system for which I have no name. He was a genuine African and had inherited some of the so-called magical powers said to be possessed by African and Eastern nations. Sandy instructed Douglass to find the root of a herb in the forest that had mystical powers of protection. After undisclosed preparations, Sandy further instructed Douglass to wear the root on his right side because it would be impossible for Covey to strike a blow that with this root, no white man could whip him. To Douglass, talk of magically endowed herbs and roots was very absurd and ridiculous, if not positively sinful. These statements were guided in part by his acceptance of Christianity and can also be viewed as an appeal to both his writing audience and his fellow abolitionists. One of the key arguments used by abolitionists to undermine the legitimacy of slavery was that few slaves received true Christian instruction. This was tangibly measured by the persistence of heathen or savage African religious practices in the plantation South. And despite Douglass's obvious disdain for conjure, he still wore the root. In August 1834, a confrontation Douglass had with Covey involved a protracted wrestling bout between the two that rendered the former Negro breaker as gentle as a lamb for the next 6 months that Douglass lived with him. And although Douglass never fully acknowledged it, the root in his right pocket was certainly a factor in his new spirit of assertiveness and resistance. In another case, William Webb, a conjurer living in Kentucky, became concerned about the cruel treatment faced by slaves on a neighboring plantation. After secretly meeting with the slaves, Webb urged them to gather roots that were then placed into bags. The slaves then walked around their own quarters a few times and positioned their bags in front of their master's abode during the morning hours. These steps were taken to induce their masters to have dreams about the slaves gaining retribution for past wrongs. Shortly after, the master reportedly began to treat the slaves decidedly better, and Webb's influence over the slaves was to increase dramatically as a result. In a case related to Henry Clay Bruce by a female slave from Amelia County, Virginia, a conjurer was said to have been employed to aid about 30 slaves who were feared who were fearing their imminent sale to the cotton fields of Alabama in the year 1800. And hearing of a conjurer living 10 miles away from the plantation, the slaves pooled their resources to pay him to set a hand or a jack on their master. After receiving $10 in payment, this conjurer went to the front door steps of the great house about 12 o'clock that night, dug a small hole under the ground step, took from his pocket a little ball, talked to it a while in a whisper, then kissed it and put it in the hole and covered it carefully and came away. The key was ensuring that the master actually stepped over the hand. And if that did not occur, then all the conjurer's preparations and incantations to make the charm effective would have been a wasted effort. Fortunately for those slaves, the next morning they saw the master come down the steps and walk around a while, then go back over the particular step. It was thought that this ensured the success of the hand. In any case, the slaves were never sold to Alabama. Fugitive slave Henry Bibb related similar experiences. According to Bibb, the general prescription for dealing with an abusive master was some kind of bitter root, which the slave was directed to chew and spit in the direction of the master. That sounds like Low John, huh? Along with the root were certain kinds of powders to sprinkle about their master's dwelling. This is all done for the purpose of defending themselves in some peaceful manner. After a conjurer gave Bibb the protective powders and roots, he did not receive a whipping for leaving the plantation without permission. Bibb finally trusted in conjuration and witchcraft, which led him to believe that he could do what he pleased without getting flogged. Thus emboldened, he left the plantation again without his master's permission. On his return, Bibb's master punished him for absconding, but he added, I did not believe that he could do it while I had the root and the dust. Unfortunately for Bibb, however, his master was so enraged at his slave's saucy retorts that he grasped a handful of switches and punished him severely in spite of all his roots and powders. And despite the seeming failure of the charms of protection, Bibb was to consult yet another conjurer who gave him a concoction composed of fresh cow manure, red pepper, and hair from a white man's head to safeguard Bibb from further abuse by his master. That Bibb was to continue believing in conjure even after evidence that the protective charms did not work is indicative of how much sway this practice had in the slave community. And even the failure of these charms to protect slaves from their masters or from other whites could be explained without disturbing the foundations of these spiritual beliefs. Henry Clay Bruce claimed that if a slave with a protective hand or jack got whipped or so reported to the old conjurer, he would promptly claim one of three things: either that someone removed the jack, or that the fellow who failed to carry out the instructions, or had no faith in the jack and therefore was deserving of punishment. Not only did conjurers claim to possess supernatural abilities and charms to protect fellow slaves, these spiritualists were also able at times to avoid their own punishment from whites. Susan Snow, an ex slave from Wilcox County, Alabama, testified that her mother was a Black African who could not be whipped by her master. This was due to Snow's mother being a conjurer, and they was all scared till the next day to get somebody to help tie her up. Then he forgot to whip her. They used to say she was a conjurer, and they was all scared of her. This fear was perhaps associated with conjurers having command over both esoteric and mundane means of retribution. Their knowledge of roots and herbs gave them the simultaneous ability to cure the ailing and to poison wrongdoers. This skill in creating toxic substances made Gullah Jack Pritchard one of the key conspirators in the 1822 Denmark-Vesey conspiracy, a feared presence among the whites of Charleston, South Carolina. One of his contingency plans, in case the rebellion failed or was betrayed, was so frightening that all mention of it was intentionally omitted from the version of the trial record made publicly available by Judges Lionel Kennedy and Thomas Parker. Henry Haig, one of the conspirators who turned state's witness, told the court that Jack was going to give me a bottle with poison to put into my master's pump and to as many pumps as he could about town. And he said he wanted to give the other bottles to those he could trust too. Joe Blassingame argued that conjurers were industrious enough to avoid punishment and in turn told their slave comrades that they were not punished because they had cast a spell on their masters. This was not always the case, however. In William Wells Brown's 1968 discussion of the conjurer Dinky, industriousness alone did not explain his uncanny ability to avoid punishment. In fact, Dinky was known to never work, but was also never beaten or sold, typically wearing a snake skin around his neck, carrying a petrified frog in one pocket and a dried lizard in the other. Dinky was such a feared figure on the plantation that Brown claimed he was his own master. Not only were conjurers thought to be able to protect themselves and others from punishment at the hands of whites, it was also believed that they could foretell the outcome of rebellions and runaway attempts. This ability was said to have saved Philip, the blind preacher, from execution in the trials following the Denmark-Vesey conspiracy. Philip predicted the disastrous outcome of the plot and discouraged slaves from continuing on their ill-fated path. In similar fashion, Frederick Douglass received a warning from Sandy Jenkins, who informed Douglass about a series of dreams he had had while slaves on the plantation were plotting a mass escape. Sandy's interpretation of the dreams did not bode well for the conspirators, and he told Douglass, "There is something in that dream. There is indeed, honey." And despite these warnings, slaves continued their plans. On the morning of the escape, Douglass himself had a premonition. "I had a sudden presentiment which flashed upon me like lightning in a dark night. I instantly turned to Sandy Jenkins, who was near me, and said to him, 'Sandy, we are betrayed. Something just told me so.' Sandy replied to Douglass, 'Man, that is strange, but I feel just as you do.' And within minutes, the plan was revealed and the slaves were placed into custody. At times, the predictions of slave fortune tellers had positive outcomes. Uncle Frank of St. Louis, Missouri, described by William Wells Brown as a slave who was very distinguished, not only among the slave plantation, but also the whites, as a fortune teller, once predicted that Brown would successfully escape bondage. After being paid a fee of 25 cents, Uncle Frank gazed into a gourd filled with water and immediately relayed the results. Brown would later query whether the old man was a prophet or the son of a prophet. "I cannot say, but there's one thing certain: many of his predictions were verified." And so, in our next telling on tomorrow night, we're going to discuss Harriet Tubman and a few other central key figures in Southern uprisings and rebellions and their relationship to hoodoo conjure, and the like. I want to open the mics of Queen Mother Sister Toni Val Martinez, and then followed by Elder Reggie. Here we know as Green Soap on the platform. Greetings and salutations to you both. Come on in.
Greetings, everyone. Peace and blessings. So glad you could join us. Tonight, I'm gonna say like my daughter. My anxiety is high. I don't know if y'all aware, but once again, the Black culture keepers are under attack in the city of New Orleans. This time, it's the social aid and pleasure clubs through the second line, and they having a meeting Thursday in city council. And I don't know if I got PTSD from the last time culture bearers in this city was under attack in 2005, the Black Massing Indians. And a couple of weeks later was Hurricane Katrina.
Mm-hmm.
So ever since I've been looking at this all day and trying to find out as much as I can and going inside myself, it just make me get more anxiety because there are, even though we see the majority of younger people that's in these crews that can walk the parades and the crews, they are elders in those groups. They just had a 77-year-old elder pass away in one of those groups, those marching crews. So the second line clubs, as we call them, but the benevolent clubs have been around as long as the Black Masking Indians.
Mm-hmm.
And the thing about what they're going under attack for them now is they got to have a $5 million insurance policy for them to parade. And they just told them this 2 weeks ago. And once again, it's the New Orleans Police Department that's coming with this. It was the New Orleans Police Department that went after the Black Masking Indians. So I don't know. I just feel I'm out of sorts. I just got high anxiety. I don't like to use that word. That's these new generation words. I just like to say my nerves is bad. So I don't know. I'm thinking about just going to the meeting Thursday myself just to see how it go down. Cause it's gonna be a doozy. But it is what it is. So I like to pass it on to Elder Reggie. Cause honestly, I can't get, every time I try
Thank
to
you,
get my
Sister
mind
Toni.
to go left, it goes right back to that subject again. So I just pass it on to Elder Reggie tonight.
Okay, Sister Toni, thank you. Divine Prince, thanks for a great show. Collective audience in the chat. I just want to just piggyback a little bit off what Divine Prince had read on conjuration. And this may tie into something you can do when you go to that meeting, Sister Toni. It reads, incantation is a magical formula intended to trigger a magical effect on a person or object, often expressed through words that are spoken, sung, or chanted. It is commonly associated with rituals and can be used in various contexts, such as spells or charms. In essence, incantations are utterance that are believed to possess magical powers. So let's take Frederick Douglass and the root he had in his pocket. A conjurer would get that root or have a person go get the root. And when they bring it to the conjurer, he may put peppers. And in Nigeria, they put guinea peppers in their mouth, 7 of them. And as they're chewing on the peppers, they are spitting. But when they are spitting, they're saying these incantations to make that charm become active and alive and to do the task that you are programming it to do. With that being said, in modern time, and when I was coming up as a young person in New Orleans, They say if anyone goes to court or anyone around the courthouse, have them spit little small spittle out of their mouth 7 times in the courtroom, and that person that they spitting in favor of is sure to come home that day. So what I'm saying, Sister Toni, if you would like to try it when you go to that meeting, just do a little spurt, what we call spritz, 7 times to reverse what the New Orleans Police Department is trying to do. And that's what I wanted to add.
Yeah, they also say you could put High John the Conqueror under your tongue when you spit, or either like Divine said, you could put Low John. But it's just, it's not sitting well with my spirit at all. And I'm not even the type person that even go to second lines. I'm not in a second line culture. But it's just not sitting right with my spirit, you know. Like I said, I don't know if I got PTSD from the last time our black culture keepers was in the city council chambers 20 years ago. Exactly.
But Sister Toni, I just want to get a little clarity. From what I was following was that the $5 million insurance is for trucks, wagons, the things they pull where people be dancing on the back. I don't know what you call it.
Trolleys.
Trolleys, yes. If you're gonna have that, but if you're just doing the walking part, you don't have to have it. But most second lines will have trolleys, people selling stuff like that, and so those vehicles do follow behind the second line.
And also on the trolleys is the older members of the second line club and those that can't walk the route to be a part of the second line.
That's correct.
I had my daughter, for whatever reason, because she could have walked it, but she was with a group that was on a trolley a couple of years ago in the second line. But that's what they call them, trolleys. And it just seems like they never had a problem with the trolleys before. Nobody got ran over by a trolley. Nobody fell off a trolley. They move so slow. You know, they move so slow. So the group see it as nitpicking.
Yes.
The group
What I see it as what we call low hanging fruit. Yes.
You know,
and I see it as low hanging fruit. They're going after something they know they could get and probably get a win at. They're not.
And you know, to me, it seemed like they always attacking the culture of the city. And by saying that, the majority of this culture in this city that made New Orleans is Black and Creole, which I don't separate the two. But I mean, we make the city what it is. And someone sent me a video today from off Frenchman Street where a brass band was playing. And you know, they always have a brass band on that corner by Cafe Brazil or Cafe Negril. I don't know the name they call them now because it's been a minute since I've been out there. But it was where the old Cafe Brazil used to be. And this white guy comes out and starts screaming at the jazz band, telling them to get the F out, get off, move. I mean, hostile. And it ensued that a fight did break out because more whites came out the bar to the aid of the white guy who was cursing at the brass bands. And the members of the brass bands were saying, you don't own these streets. You don't own these streets. But to me, they come here and they think they do own the streets. And they want to change it.
Someone sent me that video also, and it really got my blood to boiling. because those guys go there all the time. And now it seems as though since Trump been in office, people have been emboldened to just speak their mind, their piece. I know some people call them quote unquote Karens and Carls, and that's what that video seemed to me. To just approach those guys, to run them in front of that establishment, but yet they was on the right of way of the city right of way. And I just thought that was a violation.
And the thing that bothered me is normally, from what I knew, it used to be a lot of young guys that went to high school bands that would go out on the street and play on that corner.
Mm-hmm.
And, you know, they get together, they go play, they get their little donations or whatever. That's how they made their little hustle. But these guys was young high school guys that really had talent for jazz. And I just was thinking, what if that man would have run up on some of them juveniles like that from the high schools and attacked them, because they was all on the ground fighting.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, it was a fight.
Yeah. Yes.
But, you know, the culture, every aspect of the culture, it seemed like they take their time picking that one till they get that one done, then they pick at the other one. You know, I don't know. It's just not sitting right with me at all. You know, so many restaurants that been in the city for a long time. They got 3 restaurants alone in the quarter that got notices that they got to move.
Mm-hmm.
You know, from new on, I'm like, well, what is they trying to do to the city? I don't know. Look like they should be trying to keep all the culture, keep us happy, because that's what the people really come here for. The culture, keep us. So I don't know, but I got high John, so I'm still in debate if I'm going or not. It depends on what my spirit tell me, because that one in 2005 got heated. It got heated.
Yes, it did.
And some elements that might end up there, like fire and coal, it's gonna really be a problem. I just have to see how my spirit let me go.
Yeah, I agree. In the video, I ain't gonna call a young man a troublemaker, but he's another stand-up type guy. I seen him in the video for the 6 Ward Stepper second line group, who said he definitely gonna be there at that meeting, and he has the compensity to really speak his mind and cross some lines. That's all I'll say.
Yeah, and they had a protest today. The second liners protested at Gallia Hall today. The groups joined together to go protest. So, I don't know. This is not giving me a good feeling, like I said. But we all got to, I might even, if I go, I'm going to have to bring the bay leaf too.
You bring the bay leaf, sister. That'll work. See, we're talking real hoodoo voodoo, as we call it. Yeah, you have to use what you have at hand sometime to get change done.
Yeah. But
go ahead, sister. I know you're full tonight. Go ahead.
We're gonna have to do some conjuring. Some conjuring on that.
Yes.
What say you, Divine Prince?
Oh yeah, most certainly.
Yeah.
Well, our time is coming to an end. I'm sorry we took up most of the night not talking so much. Well, conjuring was in the play, because that's what we're gonna have to do.
Yeah.
And I wonder how many other conjurers will be in the crowd, because you never know.
Right.
But it's just something that I'm feel we should keep a watch on, considering the past history of history repeating itself.
Yes. And I like to piggyback off history repeating itself, because when the Mardi Gras Indian tradition was attacked, we was in hurricane season. And like you said, in 2005, Hurricane Katrina did hit the city of New Orleans for whatever reason. And now we are still in hurricane season, and they're attacking the second line groups, which is a staple of the city culture. That leaves open any and everything. So we, as a city, got to be mindful and careful that we don't want history to repeat itself. And with that, I say, lest we forget, the spiritual medicine of voodoo brings healing and relief from the shackles of slavery that binds the master and the slave to the same chain of social division. In 2025, we are talking culture. We are talking different people's perspective on what is culture. We have to realize, in order to make it, we got to find a common ground. With that, I say, Ashe, Ashe, Ashe. We love you all. Thanks for such a great show tonight, Divine Prince, Sister Toni, and the collective audience.
All is a blessing.
All is a blessing. Good night.
Yeah.